Hi, it's Heather with Wonder Fun Books again, and I'm here with some more tips to help you read aloud to your children. There are going to be 3 additional videos in this sequence, and they're all going to help you read aloud different types of material because there are different ways to read different sorts of material, whether you're talking nonfiction or poetry, or just traditional chapter books as opposed to picture books. You saw me in the prior video read a few snippets of some picture books, and I love reading picture books, but a lot of people do really well at reading picture books. But once you get to older children and different types of reading, it can become a little bit more difficult. And so I wanted to share with you some tips. Now, some of these, I will tell you, I have pulled from Jim Trelease's Read Aloud Handbook, but most of them I've just picked up by reading to my own kids. So anyway, I hope that they help you. And if you want more information, this isn't a good book. The other one is Mem Fox's Reading Magic. So I highly encourage you to pick those up if you would like to get better at reading aloud to your kids. All right, so without further ado, let's dive into the wonderful world of chapter books. Now, the first thing to know when you're picking a chapter book is that you have to pick something that you're going to enjoy reading, because otherwise you'll do something like fall asleep, and that doesn't help anybody. Or you'll get tired of reading it, and again, that doesn't help anybody. You want to read something that you personally are excited about. So the next little tip that I have for you, I'm gonna read a couple of lines from The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and then I'll share the tip. Hold on. So this is the C.S. Lewis's The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Once there were 4 children whose names were Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy. This story is about something that happened to them when they were sent away from London during the war because of the air raids. Okay, so we're literally 2 sentences into this book, and it's set in a different time. Frankly, this book is set in the 1940s during World War II, where London was being bombed, and so they sent children out to the countryside without their parents to live with either extended family members, sometimes to live with strangers, but at any rate, so that's just one example in this book of stuff that you have to explain to children. Now, explaining a word here and there isn't the biggest deal in the world, but when you have to explain an entirely different set of circumstances that they will know nothing about, like, for example, London and the war and the air raids, and what's an air raid? It might be better to choose a different book. I actually tried to read this to my kids before they were quite old enough to do that, because and here's another little tip. In general, you can read books that are about 3 to 4, about 2 to 3 grade levels above where their reading level is, and they will understand it in general. But when you're dealing with circumstances like this, where they have zero idea what's going on, and you have to explain like every other sentence for a while, you're going to lose interest. So pick a different book. And there's no shame in putting down a book if you start to read it and you go, I don't think this is right for you right now. That's okay to do. So we got about a half a chapter into this one, and they were completely lost, and so we stopped reading it. And a couple of years later, my mom read it to the boys, and they ate it up. But it was because they just had a little bit more depth of information, little bit more depth in terms of history, and then they were able to figure out what the war was, what the air raids meant, and that kind of thing. So again, pick something that you like, but also make sure that it's going to have the right level of background knowledge that they need to have. Or if it doesn't have the level of background knowledge, then make sure it explains it. And so now I'm going to pick another chapter book. This is Anna Hibiscus by Atanuki, or Atanuke, I don't know exactly how you pronounce her name. And this was originally published here in the United States by Kane Miller. And it's now out of print through Kane Miller, but I think you can find it elsewhere. But at any rate, this is Anna Hibiscus. I love this book because the language is so rich and it explains things really well. There are also pictures, and whenever you have a chapter book that has pictures in it, make sure that you show the pictures to your kids because they're really going to enjoy that. Okay. And it works, of course, especially well if they're sitting on your lap with you while you're reading it. But if they're not, then make sure you turn the book around every now and again and show them the pictures. Anna Hibiscus lives in Africa, amazing Africa. She lives in an old white house with balconies and secret staircases, a wonderful house in a beautiful garden inside a big compound. The trees are full of sweet, ripe fruit, and the flowers are full of sweet, juicy nectar, because this is Africa, and Africa can be like this. Outside the compound is the city, an amazing city of lagoons and bridges and roads, of skyscrapers and shantytowns. Anna Hibiscus lives with her mother, who is from Canada, her father, who is from Africa, her grandmother and her grandfather, her aunties and her uncles, and loads of cousins, and her twin baby brothers Double and Trouble. There are so many people in Anna's family that even she cannot count them all. Anna Hibiscus is never lonely. There are always cousins to play and fight with. Uncles and aunties are always laughing and shouting, and her mother or father and grandmother and grandfather are always around. To be alone in Anna Hibiscus's house, you have to hide. Sometimes Anna squeezes into some cool, dusty, forgotten place and waits for that exciting moment when her family begins to call, and then a cousin or uncle finds her and her aunties, thank God. One day, Anna's mother told the family that in Canada, she grew up in a house with only her mother and father. What? Cried Auntie Grace. All alone, only the three of you? Yes, I had a room all of my own, said Anna's mother wistfully. Now again, you might have to tell the kids what wistfully means, but you also might be able to demonstrate it with your tone of voice. And that's one word. See, this story, as you can tell, it's explaining everything from start to finish. And so the kids don't need a background knowledge, except they might, need to know where Africa is. Yes, and I had a room all of my own, said Anna's mother wistfully. And Anna's grandmother looked at her. They made you sleep alone? She asked. It was not a punishment, said Anna's mother. It was a good thing to have my own room. Anna Hibiscus and her cousins looked at each other. Imagine sleeping alone in the dark. Nobody likes to sleep alone, said Anna's grandmother. Anna Hibiscus laid her warm brown cheek on her mother's white arm. Don't worry, Mama, she said. You have all of us now. You'll never be alone again. Now, to us, of course, here in the United States, that sounds like a threat. To Anna Hibiscus in amazing Africa, that's a joy. But as you can see, there's a difference between The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, where my kids were lost, literally, by the second sentence, and Anna Hibiscus, which explains the background for everything, even if it's a completely different culture. So, and again, you heard me do the things that I told you in the first video. You modulate your voice for tone, for pitch, for emotion. You can be silly, you can use different voices, and then you can use movement, and you can, look back and forth at each other when you're the kids looking at each other. So, movement and so forth. So keep doing those things as you're reading aloud, even for chapter books. But then as you're reading, just pick good books that you're going to enjoy reading aloud to your children, and don't be scared to get into the story. It's going to be lots of fun. All right, so that's the second group of reading tips I have for you for chapter books, and thanks for watching. Happy reading.